Welcome to this week's edition of Ask an MS Expert. I'm John Strum, and I'm the host of the Real Talk MS podcast. Each week, Real Talk MS reaches thousands of people in more than 100 countries around the world with the information and news that people affected by MS need to know. My wife, Jean, lived with progressive MS for 23 years, so I've had a front row seat experiencing all the ways that MS can impact a family. Currently, I serve on the MS Society's Community Review of MS Research Committee. I'm a district activist leader and trustee for the National MS Society, and I chair the Society's California Government Relations Advisory Committee. The MS Society's Ask an MS Expert webcast is designed to give us a place for the MS community to connect and to connect you with experts who are ready to answer your questions on the topics that impact people affected by MS every day. Please feel free to post your comments and questions on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. MS navigators are online throughout today's program, answering those questions, connecting you to resources. MS is expensive, and the cost of living with MS can have a significant impact on your quality of life. People with MS have reported problems ranging from managing money in ways that include late bill payments to unnecessary and often costly impulse buying. Bruce McClary, the Senior Vice President of Membership and Media Relations at the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, is joining me today to talk about budgeting when you're living with MS. Welcome, Bruce, and thanks for being with us today.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me with you.
A recent study funded by the National MS Society found the average cost of living with MS is $88,487 a year. That's a significant amount of money. So when we talk about budgeting and financial planning when you're living with MS, we're really talking about planning to preserve your quality of life. So let's start with a couple of important definitions. Bruce, what exactly is a budget, and what are the benefits of having a budget?
That's a great question. I mean, it's always a good starting point to talk about budgeting. That is the foundation of every decision you make regarding your personal finances and reaching your goals. So a budget is a financial plan that outlines your expected income and expenses over a specific period. And that the frequency of budgeting is very important. So it's kind of like a roadmap, really, but it's also about geolocation. Where are you now, and how did you get where you are, and where would you like to go? So having a budget gives you the opportunity to track your spending, to understand your spending, where you're spending the most, where you're spending the least. It helps you identify areas where you can cut back. It helps you save for future goals. Goals are very important. And then, of course, it helps you prepare for unexpected expenses. But you really can't have a workable plan to get to your goals if you don't understand where you are in the moment and how you got there. So it's very important to visit your budget, to track your spending, and to look for ways to optimize your budget to help you get to the goals that you have for yourself. So that's really what a budget is and how it can help you.
So I have a two-part question for you, I guess. What other factors do people with MS specifically have to consider when making a budget? And because MS can be so unpredictable, how can someone go about creating a budget that accounts for potential future medical expenses?
Yeah, another great question. I mean, this is, these circumstances just add another challenge to the budgeting process. And so it's very important, first and foremost, to try to get as much of a handle on fluctuating medical costs as you can, to understand how those costs may change, what may drive those costs in the future, based on your current needs and where you think you are headed with your treatment and your medical needs and your medical care. Potential changes in income due to disability are an example of areas where you need to focus, and it helps to understand what scenarios may play out in the future and how you may need to adjust your budget to address those changes, and any long-term care needs that you see ahead of you, and whether those needs are based on a higher degree of certainty or not. Again, think about all the different scenarios that could play out in your situation, and work through those options so that way you have clarity about how your budget may change under certain circumstances. So then when something happens, if your care takes a different direction, or if your needs in one area increase, it's likely then, if you planned ahead and you thought about these scenarios, you can pull something that it gives you a roadmap on how to address that change. And that the fewer surprises there are, the better capable you will be to handle these things in the moment and pivot. So that helps as well. And again, there could be all kinds of different estimates that you have to put together related to medical expenses, disability income, savings goals in your budget. So it's always helpful as well to consider different types of budgeting tools that are available to allow for variable income and expenses.
Marcus wants to know if there's a difference between budgeting and financial planning, and if there is one more beneficial than the other for someone who's living with MS?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, budgeting is a short-term plan, really focusing on managing monthly income and expenses. Financial planning is about the long-term strategy for achieving financial goals, including retirement, and of course, in this case, including healthcare and estate planning. So both are essential. And I would say financial planning is particularly important for people with MS to ensure long-term financial security. But I would follow up again by saying both are essential and they can work hand in hand.
We heard from Leah, who says she's struggling to keep up with her bills after experiencing an MS relapse. She knows she needs to have a budget, but feels anxious every time she tries to start. Are there any resources that can help Leah get started making a budget for herself?
Yeah, there are so many free online budgeting tools and apps available. There are a lot of popular options that you can find readily available on the internet. It's very important, though, to make sure that you're selecting an option that meets your needs, but also is safe and secure. We all know that when you're out there on the internet, there are some security issues with certain websites, especially those that gather your personal information. So you always want to be clear as you're selecting some of these apps, some of these tools that can help you in these circumstances, to ensure that you are protected, but also that your needs are served. And there are many popular apps that are out there, but oftentimes we talk about the tool called You Need a Budget, otherwise known as YNAB. It's a free tool. It helps you work through some of these budgeting scenarios. It's one of the more complete tools that are out there in the market right now. And a lot of people ask, well, what about Mint? Well, Mint was taken off the market earlier this year. It was wildly popular. A lot of people recommended it. But I would say a suitable replacement for Mint, a suitable substitute going forward is You Need a Budget. There are also other apps like Pocket Guard, but you can go through the marketplace and look at those kind of budgeting tools. And if you really want to start with the basics, a good, safe place to start is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's a government agency that's focused on financial well-being and financial protection. And they actually have some budgeting tools on their website. They're very basic, but it's a good starting point.
Harvey tells us that he also wants to budget his money to feel more financially stable at the end of each month, but he doesn't spend very much time online. Is it possible for Harvey to create and follow a budget without accessing the internet or using any tech-related tools?
I love this question. It makes me think of my dad sitting down every month with the budget and working on with pen and paper to go through all of the details. And what my dad did was he used graphing paper to create a spreadsheet that he could use with pen and paper every month to track his expenses. And it helps to know what areas of your budget you need to look at and what category, how you need to approach each category. there's a lot of guidance available to help you get started if you want to create something from scratch. My dad would be so proud if you do that, but you can go to your public library to get some direction on what you might do to create that. There could be templates available. If you're not going online, the library is a great place to start. Libraries are also great places to access financial help in terms of budgeting seminars, groups that get together and talk about budgeting and saving money. So I would advocate certainly for your local library as a resource, and get that pen and get that graph paper, and you can put together your own template. If you need something that's pre-made, that's printed and pre-made, you don't want to sit down with a graph paper, you don't want to map out a budget that way. There are also tools available. Some of it may require getting online. So if you know somebody who has online access, or again, using the library as a tool, if you can get to the library, use one of the computers, visit these websites to print your budget. The NFCC, the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, my organization, has a free budget template and expense worksheet that you can print. And you can print copies of that and use that as you need each month. And again, I mentioned in the earlier question, the CFPB as a resource. Their budget template is also printable. And you can go to the CFPB and look for monthly budget. You can search for that on their website, or you can use the direct link. You can download that and you can print that out and use that as well.
Lionel has two questions. He's in his early 30s, and first, he's wondering how much he should be saving for healthcare costs in retirement, and then wants to know when he should start saving.
Well, I guess the first thing I should mention is it's very difficult to provide very broad advice that also lands at a specific amount. Your circumstances are unique. Your starting point may be different from someone else's, and also healthcare costs vary. So again, I can't throw a specific figure or percentage out there. However, addressing the second question and then getting back to the first question, starting to save early is crucial. Contributing to a health savings account, if you're eligible, is absolutely something to do, and because it offers tax advantages. So my advice would be that you contribute early and often to help you afford medical care later in life, as the money in your HSA grows tax-free. And it can do that for 30 to 40 years. So the earlier you start, the more likely you are to get ahead of some of your needs in the future and be prepared to have the money, the tax-free savings, to apply to those expenses. You can also use a HSA calculator to run through different contribution scenarios. So that can also help you determine, once you get started, preferably early, what you should be setting aside. And there's a great resource on Benefit Wallet. It's a calculator that can help you get started in that area.
Allison says she has put a budget together, but found that her expenses are simply higher than her income. What are some ways that Allison can work on reducing those expenses?
Yeah, it's often hard to know where to start, but I think having that budget and sitting down and looking at your expenses and looking at your income gives you the perfect starting point to take a deeper dive and start looking at areas where you can make some changes in your budget. And I would start by saying a budget is a living, breathing thing. It is not etched in stone, and it's not something that has to be the same from month to month throughout the rest of your life. In fact, the purpose of a budget is to be something that can be changed to adapt to different life circumstances. So if your life circumstances right now are putting you in a situation where you have less money available to pay for the expenses you have, that is your cue to sit down and go through and try to identify areas to make adjustments. So look first in categories of non-essential spending. Any kind of discretionary spending that you have is in play for any kind of a cut, reduction, or adjustment, to make these areas either more affordable or to right-size them, even temporarily, to help you get through a difficult financial period. negotiate bills. And this is one of my favorite things to recommend, because so few people think they have negotiating power when it comes to reaching out to your utility providers and your creditors and your lenders. We even conducted a survey a while back showing that a very small percentage of Americans even consider reaching out and having the conversation with their utility billers and with their creditors to try to find more affordable ways to manage what they owe. And oftentimes these different providers have solutions ready for you if you'll just reach out proactively and ask. So that's one thing that can help you find additional flexibility in your budget. And then, of course, you can always go back to some of the age-old advice of looking for opportunities to save on groceries and services using coupons or discounts. You can consider if it's a really major shortfall in your budget, you might want to consider downsizing or changing your living situation so that becomes more affordable on the housing side. And you can also explore nonprofit resources and government assistance programs in significant to resolve significant budget issues.
Kathleen lives with MS, and she's also living with substantial medical and credit card debt. Kathleen feels she'll never be debt-free and struggles to prioritize money management. So what are some strategies for Kathleen to help manage her debt while planning for ongoing medical care expenses?
Yeah, first of all, I think the thing that I would let Kathleen know is you're never at the point where things are hopeless when it comes to options in dealing with both your medical and your credit card debt. You may feel that you have exhausted all available options, and you might feel that you've reached the end of the line at some point, but that just really calls attention to the fact that there are resources out there that can help you identify things that you may not have considered or may not be aware of. So it's helpful to understand that. But there are two approaches you can take. And of course, before you get to that point, there are some things that you can do for yourself to try to get your credit card debt under control while addressing some of the medical debt as well. And I think going back to my earlier advice about budgeting also includes understanding how you're going to repay the debt that you owe. So that means creating a debt repayment plan. And it helps to list the debts that you owe, the minimum payments, the balances, and the interest rate, and understand how that affects the progress you're making in paying down your debt. A good way to get ahead of that is to prioritize high interest rate debts. You can use what's called the debt snowball or the debt avalanche. Those are two very popular methods to accelerate your debt repayment and to get those debts paid down and to get ahead of the interest and the fees that you might be charged. And you may consider debt consolidation loans as an option if you have qualifying credit and your accounts are paid up to date. And that can also help you identify ways to save on your monthly payment as well as the interest and fees. You can also explore options for medical debt relief. There are many organizations out there that can provide access to resources that can help take the edge off the out-of-pocket medical costs and help you understand where insurance coverage gaps exist and how you might be able to address those. And then you can continue budgeting and saving for future medical costs. But I would highly recommend contacting an NFCC certified credit counselor for a financial review and guidance on available debt management options. If things are starting to fall behind, if your payments are falling behind, if you're getting hit with late fees, over limit fees, or even if you're dealing with debt collectors, the initial review is typically free. And what you discover with the help of the credit counselor is something that can make a big difference, because it helps you end up selecting the most suitable options based on your circumstances and goals. And of course, you can connect with that resource by going to nfcc.org.
Jose says he knows medical costs for MS can be high, and he's heard that there are ways to maximize his insurance through strategically planning his medical appointments. Can you explain how Jose could get the most benefit from his insurance?
Yeah, I think that this is an area, again, where I think it's about, timing and understanding, your own coverage and working with your network providers to schedule appointments. And then, of course, utilizing some preventive care services that are available, get pre-authorization for costly treatments, and be very aggressive in appealing some denied claims in this process. But I think it's very important at the onset to clearly understand your insurance coverage and how that may impact this strategy, and then have discussions with your network providers, your in-network providers, to talk about this, to maximize that benefit, because it is possible to maximize the benefits of your insurance through strategically planning these appointments. But it all starts with clearly understanding your insurance coverage and having an open dialogue with your in-network providers about how to maximize that strategy.
Kelsey tells us that she's prepared and followed a budget for a few months, and now her income has slightly increased. She's worried that this minor increase in income might cause her to lose eligibility for some assistance programs. Is there anything she can do to keep both her increase in income and her eligibility in these programs?
Yeah, first of all, for Kelsey, yes, it is true that increased income can affect eligibility for certain assistance programs. Kelsey should contact relevant agencies to understand some of the specific income limits and reporting requirements. And if help is needed in understanding some of those choices, I think it's helpful to reach out to maybe a nonprofit organization or other provider of assistance that can guide you through some of the complexities of these assistance programs, your eligibility, and even areas where your insurance coverage comes into play. One such organization is Patient Advocate Foundation. They're a great nonprofit organization that does provide guidance in these areas. I would strongly encourage reaching out to them for some additional guidance here.
A moment ago, I heard you mention working with a certified credit counselor. Can you explain what a credit counselor is and how they might be helpful to someone?
Yeah, a nonprofit NFCC certified credit counselor provides guidance on managing debt and improving your overall financial well-being. Essentially, this is a nonprofit financial professional who's your financial advocate, there to help you find the most suitable options based on your circumstances. And because the initial consultation is typically free, these nonprofit credit counseling services are an excellent place to start. And if you need help beyond that step, if you're considering other financial professionals to work with, I would recommend considering maybe working with tax planners, tax advisors, a disability insurance specialist, and even an attorney who specializes in financial planning and insurance issues. But I think a great starting point, if you're looking at budgeting and debt management and you're trying to consider where you are and where you need to be, a nonprofit NFCC certified counselor is a great place to start, because the consultation initially is typically free, and it gives you a lot of information and advice to start with as a foundation for your next steps. And it helps you decide what's best to do next based on what you learn through that initial consultation. And of course, you can get that at nfcc.org.
Carlos says he's interested in using a credit counselor, but isn't sure where to start. What's the best way for Carlos to find a nonprofit NFCC certified credit counselor?
Well, there are two ways to connect with an NFCC certified credit counselor through the National Foundation for Credit Counseling. First, you can visit the website, nfcc.org. Not only can the website connect you directly with a nonprofit credit counselor, it can also help you drill down to the specific area of need that you want to address during your counseling session. And you can also reach out to counselors on the phone if you're not accessing the internet, and there's a toll-free number you can call to accomplish the same thing, to connect with an NFCC certified counselor. And that phone number is 1-800-388-2227. That's 1-800-388-2227. And you may be looking for somebody near you where you can go meet with them in person, if that's your option. But I would say that brick and mortar services may not be available in all areas. So if you start with nfcc.org, or if you start with the toll-free number, 1-800-388-2227, you can get directed to somebody who is capable of assisting you either by phone or online when services aren't available in your area. But I would also caution people to be aware of imposters and these debt elimination offers that you hear on the radio or see on TV or sometimes online. Scams are very common in the debt relief space. Legitimate providers, where they do exist, don't often offer budget reviews and other services that ensure the suitability of their services. So when you work with a trusted nonprofit provider of credit counseling, like those with the NFCC, the first thing you do is go through a full financial review and get some advice from the counselor to help you better understand the options in front of you. And that's often lacking from some of these quick debt relief offers that you hear about in advertisements. So just be very careful when you're out in that space. Good idea to start with nonprofit credit counseling and go to nfcc.org.
Bruce, you've shared some very useful information with us today. What would you say are the top 3 takeaways that you'd like our viewers to remember?
Yeah, there's a recurring theme in some of the answers that I provided. And I think first and foremost, it has to do with creating a budget and addressing medical expenses. Everyone with the expectation of ongoing medical care should build a budget that considers potential future medical costs. And I addressed this in one of the earlier questions. This will help take control of finances and create a plan for a secure financial future. And of course, resources are available to help, including the free online tools I mentioned, and some of the non-internet-based methods like printing out a budget. So the tool I mentioned earlier, You Need a Budget, is an example of an often recommended free budgeting tool. And of course, you can also get printable budgets from resources like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The second item I would mention is to reduce expenses and manage debt. If you stay on top of your budget, this step is pretty easy. If expenses exceed income, explore cost-cutting strategies. If you have overwhelming debt, there are methods to manage it while planning for ongoing medical expenses. And financial professionals like NFCC certified nonprofit counselors can offer professional guidance. And of course, you can get that advice and that assistance by going to nfcc.org or calling 1-800-388-2227 for more information to connect with a counselor. And the third piece of advice that I would offer is to maximize your health insurance benefits and tap into all the resources that help make healthcare more manageable and affordable within your budget. So understanding how to strategically use health insurance significantly can reduce medical costs. And it can do that without sacrificing the quality of your care. So when you need help, you can work with support organizations that can provide guidance in this area. One such support organization is one that I mentioned earlier, and that's Patient Advocate Foundation.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. I think we have time to answer one more question from our audience. It comes from Kerry, who has put together a budget and feels his lifestyle is manageable now, but worries about his rent increasing. What are his options when it comes to rising housing costs?
Yeah, this is a very common problem for a lot of people. I mean, as we know, housing costs have risen in many, many areas across the country, not just for renters, also homeowners. The cost of owning a home beyond your mortgage itself is becoming more of an impactful on people's budgets. So I think 2 things are in play here. If your housing expenses are increasing and you know that is putting a bigger and bigger dent into your budget, it's important to consider what options you have available by first engaging in a discussion with either your landlord if you're a renter or with your mortgage provider if you're a homeowner, and explore more affordable ways to manage your housing costs. And there may be alternatives. If you're a homeowner, there may be alternatives to finding a more affordable mortgage option. If you're a renter, and especially in situations where in situations where you're facing eviction or your situation is very extreme, there are assistance programs available in communities that can help prevent eviction and help you preserve your housing situation more affordably. But it all starts with a conversation either with your landlord or if you're a homeowner with your mortgage provider, and then you can take it from there. And everybody's circumstance differs, but I think it starts with asking those questions and exploring the different options to make housing more affordable. And I should mention as well that as a resource, the NFCC offers housing counseling programs. So people who are at risk of foreclosure can reach out and get assistance from HUD-approved counselors by going to nfcc.org.
Well, I want to thank everyone who submitted some great questions, and thank you, Bruce, for being with us today.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
Before we close, I want to remind you that the National MS Society's MS Navigator team is your best partner when it comes to connecting you to the very best information and resources on living with MS. You can reach an MS Navigator by phone, email, or through the Society's website by chat. For information and resources on MS, please visit the Society's website. You'll find research updates and news, information on connection programs like self-help groups and MS Friends. You'll hear about ways to get involved, and you'll find out about upcoming events that are taking place near you. Remember, you can connect with the National MS Society and others affected by MS on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And I hope you'll join me every week on the Real Talk MS podcast, where I continue the conversation that we start here. You'll find Real Talk MS at realtalkms.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. I'd like to thank Jenny for joining us today. Please remember that a recording of this webcast will be available at the Society's website at nationalmssociety.org/MSexpert, as well as on Facebook and YouTube. I hope you'll join us at this same time for next week's edition of Ask an MS Expert. You can always find our upcoming program topics on the National MS Society's website. And now I have a favor to ask each of you. Getting your feedback on today's webcast is important. So if you're watching on Facebook Live, you'll see a link to a survey pinned to the comments section. On YouTube, you'll find that link in the program description. And on Twitch, you'll find that link in the chat. Completing the survey makes a real difference. The information you provide helps us continuously improve, and it helps shape future programs. The survey takes just 1 minute, so I hope you'll take a minute to fill it out. On behalf of Jenny Nordine and National MS Society, I want to thank you once again for joining us. Please stay safe and make healthy choices.